Kill the Stigma podcast is not affiliated with any company, group, or entity. There are currently no approved uses for kratom by the FDA. Anything heard here is solely for educational purposes and should not be taken as medical advice. We will be going into detailed accounts of addiction that might be disturbing to some viewers. Therefore, viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Kill the Stigma podcast, everybody. It's official like a ref and a whistle. I am the host, the one and definitely the only Evan Garcia. And here, my sidekick right here, the guy who just fell out of the handsome tree, my little big brother, Ivan Garcia.
All the humility to come with it too, baby.
What's up, bro?
You know what I'm talking about. I love you too, man. I love you.
Let's get it going, man. Let's get it going. For those of you guys who don't know, I am a huge kratom advocate and have been for some time now. My main reason of doing this is because there's a lot of misinformation, just outright lies swirling around about kratom, and we're men on a mission to break through those. Throughout this podcast, we will be interviewing friends, family members, acquaintances, all of whom have had their lives significantly impacted by kratom in many different ways, and we're excited to get their stories out to you. With that being said, however, viewer discretion will be advised, as we will be going into very detailed accounts of people in addiction, and it could be triggering, it could be disconcerting, it could be upsetting to some people. Just keep that in mind as you go forward. I'm excited to, really excited to do this, because honestly, for years, I was ashamed of my story, and it was a part of my life that I really tried to black out and, keep anybody from knowing. But as I've gotten older and kratom has changed my life and I've watched it change other people's lives, I've realized that the knowledge that I have and we have is too great to just hold back from everybody. So, with that being said, I am excited to get this thing going.
So without further ado, let's get this thing started.
Let's get it rolling, brother.
I'll be doing the interviewing today, getting the most out of my brother so we can get all this out. So let's just jump right into it, man. Let's start with Adam and Eve and work our way backwards from there. Let's start off with just who you are, where you're from, all that good stuff.
Well, once again, I'm Evan Garcia, in case you forgot. I'm 30 years old, and I am from Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Right, and so what was like your basic home life upbringing? Take us through that.
I grew up in a really structured household, a really religious family. We went to church a lot, had both parents. My dad worked hard. My mom took care of us. I really had a really good childhood, and I got none to complain there. No trauma whatsoever to speak of, So I grew up pretty well.
Given that it was a pretty stable household, structured, all that, where would you say that like your addiction history began?
I would say as early as 13 years old. I always used to be enamored, like whenever my parents would throw parties and, have people over and they'd be drinking and taking shots. And I remember thinking, man, they make it look so damn cool. But I had tried alcohol a couple times before that, but it was so nasty to me. You know what I mean?
You don't get it.
My dad would leave his glass and I'd go there and take a sip. And I'm like, why are they drinking this stuff? But curiosity truly got the best of me when I was like 13 years old. I remember I went into my dad's liquor cabinet, dude had about 20 bottles, and I got 2 shot glasses. And you remember that Castillo rum Dad used to drink all the time? Dude, I mean, you can
always had it on hand.
Always had it. Man, it's like, you get a big bottle for like, what, $10?
$11? Yeah.
And so I remember I poured out 2 shots and I had some soda right there and I downed it. And I remember instantly, like within 2 minutes, just feeling that insane euphoria that I had never felt before in my life. The audio perception was way more intense. The overall euphoria was just something I couldn't describe. And I remember I went and sat with you guys in the living room, you and Troy.
The music sounds better.
I mean, everything, and like with the show we were watching, I think we were watching SportsCenter, and I remember just like sitting on the couch like, oh my God, this is amazing. Over the course of the next couple months, I ended up dipping into my dad's alcohol cabinet pretty regularly. So much so to the point where a couple months later, my dad went into his alcohol cabinet looking to make himself a drink. There were some bottles in there were empty. Like, why didn't I even throw them away? Looking back, like, that was just stupid. A lot of them were like damn near close inside. Most of it water. Most of it water back in those bottles. But fortunately for me, when my dad asked, he was like, where the hell did my alcohol go? My cousin had just lived with us, who was an alcoholic, a couple weeks before. My mom was trying to help him out a little bit. I ended up telling my dad, I was like, oh man, Mena was staying with us for a while, I'm pretty sure he drank it. And my dad slammed it, got all mad, and then got all mad at my mom, because obviously that was her nephew, that he allowed to stay in the house.
So I think that speaks to where you were at, and in your head, that was probably like the first time ever that like you had learn to shirk your accountability. You kind of push it off on somebody else, is completely being willing to let them take the fall. I got to get mine. That's kind of where your headspace was at.
Absolutely. I couldn't come out that I drank my dad's alcohol, so I just passed the buck, man, 100%. That's exactly what happened. I definitely think that's where that started.
So you had that early history with alcohol, and I think that's a good brief summary of it, although I know personally, as your brother, that alcohol was just a big part of your life and life.
Yeah, so that became a pretty regular thing for me, drinking when I ran out of my dad's alcohol. alcohol. If you guys know anything about downtown Colorado Springs, there's a large homeless population. It was then and it still is now. And across the street was Acacia Park, man, where you could buy basically every drug in the book there. I don't know how the cops didn't crack down on it more. Like, you have a high school right here, one of the biggest drug parks in the spring. But you know, I would walk down over to the Bijou Bridge, cross over I-25, and there'd be a bunch of homeless people there. Give them $10. Bottle of Burnett's is $7.90. You know,
Keep the change.
Keep the change, $2.20. That's going to be able to get them whatever nasty little liquor that they want. And you know what homeless guy's going to say no to that? That was a very regular routine. You know, I was known as the kid at school, like, oh hey man, let me get a drink. I know you got something on you. You know, that came like the girls liked me. You know, I felt like I was.
You were the
man.
To
my charisma. It added to. Gee, I was the man. I was the man on campus, dude. Obviously, because of that, my grades started slipping and whatnot. But that'll take us into the next part right here.
I remember being a kid, and you would tell us about, you know, what you were doing, you know, and we just thought you were like the coolest dude in the world.
Close, yeah.
I remember even being a kid, and I'm all of 8, 9 years younger than you, when you told me the stories about like how you would, you know, get the homeless people to buy it for you. I was too young to really understand what was inherently wrong with it,
right.
But I just knew that Evan doesn't just like alcohol, like Evan likes alcohol, you know what I'm saying? And I knew that was something, but I couldn't quite place it at the time. But looking back at it, you know, how do you feel about what you were doing as a kid? I mean, you're a guy with kids now. How does that make you feel?
I mean, very disappointed. I mean, if my kids were doing that same thing, I would definitely not be down with that. Looking back at that, it was very disappointing, and that's really where like my addiction like truly started with when it comes to substances, and that's before painkillers came in.
Let's get into that. How would you explain your transition into starting to take any sort of painkillers, any sort of opiates? How did that come around?
Well, you know, I've always been a very, very, very big football guy. You have too. You guys know. I mean
you already know what time it is.
You know, man, me and my brothers, dude, we are huge Colorado sports fans. We Broncos fans, Nuggets fans, Avalanche fans, huge. I mean, hell, one time we even got super drunk and became Rockies fans. Dude, seriously. So, you know, I was playing football in high school, and I remember I was covering the kick. So we kicked off. I went down there and you know, was going to make the tackle. I lined this dude up. Perfect form, textbook style tackle. I mean, lowered my shoulder into his chest, wrapped him up, fell right on him, and it was just perfect, man. I wish I had tape on that one. Yeah, I'd made that tackle 1,000 times, and so, like, the way I tackled him, he landed on my arm, and I just expected to roll off and have my arm come with me like it had 1,000 times. But in this case, it stayed under him, and in the process of rolling off, it, you know, dislocated my shoulder. And instantly freaked out, got in my friend's car, my friend's mom's car. And on the way to the hospital, she hit like this bump in the road and my arm fell back in. It was excruciating. Went to the hospital.
Did you still go to the hospital?
I still went to the hospital. But I don't even know why. They put me in a sling and
sent you on your merry way.
I don't even think they took x-rays. And so that was the end of that. My arm healed up a couple days later. Maybe a week later, we're playing football again. I stiff-armed this one dude, and I gave him the Heisman too, bro. I was like, bing, bro, but he ended up pulling my arm, and it pulled it back out, and that was terrible, bro. I had to go to the trainer, and he sat me on the ground, and it was my left shoulder, so he had me reach to my right knee and pull my knee to my chest, and that, I don't know what that does, but it fell right in. I remember like thinking, damn, that's a little scary because that's twice in a week, and then literally like 3 days later. You remember that one game in PE class where you get like the 2 trash cans with a ball on each side, and you make 2 teams, and you all have flags, so it's your job to get that ball
into the other trash can.
Get the ball that's on that trash can and take it to your side without getting your flag pulled off.
It was like trash can ball or something?
Something like that. It was, man, one of my favorite games. So
which I am in the unofficial Hall of Fame for, just putting it out there. Couldn't hold me out there.
So I remember oh man, dude, I was able to get to that back area, and man, I put the Reggie Bush moves on this dude, man. I mean, got a couple chicks too, man. I was like, how you do it? I mean, man, I'm telling you, man, I put the moves on some guys. As I was reaching to go across the little, I guess like the scoring line or whatever, I was pushed into the bleachers that we had up, and my arm fell out again, and same old thing. I ran straight to the trainer's office, and that time I did the same technique he showed me, but I had to do it like 3 times. And when it fell in, that one hurt the absolute worst, man. That one sucked. And so the second it went back in, I thought to myself, man, this is a serious problem. You know, I went home and told my mom, I said, hey, you know, we gotta look into this because I think my shoulder's damaged. So I
never once occurred to you to stop playing sports?
No, that's my blood. You know how that is, bro. We ended up got my arm checked out, and understood and learned that I needed to have surgery. I had tore my rotator cuff, tore my labrum, and there was one other one. I never remember that third one. I got a scar here and a scar back there because they had to go in through both sides and fix everything that was going on there. Mind you, I'm 15 years old. I was given one 60-count bottle of oxycodone. And really, I only needed like 10, maybe 15 of those.
Right.
I mean, those first couple of days, you're experiencing raw surgical pain, bro. That was hell. You know what I mean? After maybe about 10 days, the pain had already started to subside. Ice was basically doing all the trick for me. But I had a bottle full of painkillers that were making me feel unbelievable.
And I remember from when I had gotten my injury, I broke my foot, and they gave me like a 50-count bottle of Percocet. I know what that's like to be like, the pain's gone, but like they're telling you that you need to take it every couple hours. Mom and dad are saying like, hey, make sure you stay ahead of your dose so you're not in pain. So you're like, I can do it, and it's like incredibly socially acceptable in a situation like that. Even though by the back end of it, I knew like I was like, oh, I really like this and I don't really need it. I went in a different way that you did because I saw what happened to you.
That's one thing about you and Troy. Again, Troy's my other brother. Not you and Troy have always been really good at learning from my mistakes. I remember getting down to like the last like 5-10 pills of that bottle, and that was like the first time I ever really exhibited druggy behavior. But I guess not, because I was still hanging outside liquor stores asking people to buy it, so whatever. So I went a step up when it came to opiates, because I remember thinking to myself, hey, I wonder if I call his doctor, and I wonder if he'll give me, the pain meds I'm asking for. I'd come up with some sob story, which I did. I called him up. I said, yo, doc, my arm hurts. Like, it's not healing right. I can't sleep at night. Like, I'm almost out of these pain pills. And man, no hesitation, nothing. He was like, okay, well, I will refill your prescription, and I will have it sent over to the Walgreens on Fillmore, Nevada. And I remember getting so excited. I remember even driving there too. My mom was like, hey son, we got to be careful with this last bottle, because we're gonna have to wean you off of these, because you've been taking quite a few. And I just told her, I was like, Mom, I'm just in a lot of pain, I'm sorry, like, don't worry, this ain't an issue. So I think she kind of suspected something. I ended up getting that pill bottle, taking the whole thing. And then when I was done with that bottle, I started asking all the guys on my football team, and that's when I learned that the doctors were just handing out these pain pills like it was nothing, dude. A couple of these kids would take it, would take a pill or two, and then all of a sudden, get sick, overheat, and then they didn't want to take it anymore. So I remember when I asked them, I was like, hey man, you guys have a couple of those pills? And these dudes would give me bottles. I remember thinking like, damn, these doctors are just handing these things out like candies. That's where I definitely knew I had a problem with painkillers.
Like, how long did that, just like finding painkillers, taking painkillers, was it like a regular thing, like off the rip, or did it take time to develop?
After I got those pain pills from my teammates, that was probably like my late freshman year. Through my sophomore and my junior year, I never went and searched for them or nothing, but like anytime they came around, man, everybody,
you weren't going to say no.
I wasn't going to say no. I'd pay up pretty well for them. They were cheap back then, dude. They weren't hard to get. So anyways, that continued probably through my sophomore and junior year. And then, because I was too busy drinking and, taking pills, and my grades started to slip, I was hanging around with all the wrong people. One of the biggest mistakes in my life was hanging out with those people. I ended up dropping out of school in 12th grade. I ended up getting a job. I had a vehicle, didn't really have many bills. I found a really good connect with a lot of pills, and they were dirt cheap. At that point, that's when things really started to ramp up a little bit, because like when I got out of high school, I remember I was buying them like maybe once or twice a month, and enjoying them. And then before you know it, I was buying them every weekend. And then now I'm buying the stronger ones, and now I'm buying them a couple times during the week. And then, it's just like an avalanche, dude. It starts off small, and then all of a sudden it becomes this.
Right, and yeah, that's, at the base of my question, it was, like, what was the regularity of it? What did that look like? And so at some point, pills aren't enough. How did that transition you into, like, heavier drugs, doing, like, heroin? How did that come about?
Well, it got to the point, man, where I was spending probably like $100 sitting on pills. My tolerance was already so high. Yeah, no, man, it was a lot. Shoot, dude, there were days I spent a lot more than that, too. It got to the point where, I was taking, about $150 worth of pills a day, and it just wasn't sustainable, dude.
And I have to ask, at this point, like, were you still getting that, like, good kick? Were you getting that good feeling of just, like, awesome? Or what had it started to, like, not be as fun at this point?
It's crazy that you say that, because I remember at first I was just taking them. And then once the pills started getting stronger and stronger, I learned that you could crush them up and snort them. So then that took center stage. And then once I got up to the oxycodone 30s, anybody who's any drug use, you guys know what the 30. Nowadays, they're what you hear on the news, and now they're all laced with fentanyl. Again, this is an old Evan, just total crackhead, but hey, man, we're past that.
We've come a long way since then.
Past that, baby. But anyways, like I found out that you could drop these little blue pills on foil and basically just, take a lighter underneath and follow it with a straw or some kind of apparatus to just suck the air through, and then you can get high. I mean, when you're smoking pills off of tinfoil, bro, like your addiction's in full,
You've lost all shame. You've lost all compass of what's right and what's wrong.
100%.
Okay, what was like your first early encounters with like being offered heroin?
like in the drug world, you make connections. You may make connections.
They're hardly friends, but they're
hardly
down
friends,
with what
but
you're
like,
down with.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so if one day you try and make these so-called friends because, one day you're not going to have anything if they are, and they are, and vice versa. One day they're not going to be able to find anything, but you will, and you can tax them. You know what I mean?
Create like a net,
Yeah,
like so
100%.
somebody's going to grab something eventually.
100%. So I'll never forget that I was hanging out with these two lesbian chicks, and I remember one day I had the money. Anybody in recovery can attest to this. Like, nothing worse than having money, but the drug dealers don't have anything. Like, that is true torture. So
I guess people don't want to make some money
oh,
off
bro,
me.
it was the most frustrating thing. We were over there on the west side of the King Supers in the parking lot off of 19th and Uinta. And I remember just hanging out there and just like, I'm already in like withdrawals. I'm sweating, I'm throwing up, everything. We'd smoked some pills the night before. And so I remember thinking like, man, I'm already withdrawing. She should be withdrawing. I asked her, how are you not sick? And she was like, well, I'm doing opium. I remember she pulls out the foil and there was like a little, it looked like tar. It was basically tar. She was like, do you want to try some? And I remember being like taken aback by it, bro. Like, damn, you really just offered me heroin? Like, what the hell is that?
How dare you?
Is that what we're doing now? I had been taking pills so often and I had them so readily available and I always had the money for them that it was so crazy because I didn't even know the withdrawing off of opiates was a real thing. So I remember one day I'm at my second apartment with my wife and I couldn't get any. I had the money for it again, but that time I wasn't even like freaking out about it. I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm not getting any today, like no big deal. And so I probably used about midday that day, like noon, 1 o'clock-ish. Went to sleep that night just fine. And I woke up that next morning feeling sick. It felt like a true flu. Like, my body temperature was raised. I got the chills. My stomach, bro, my stomach was jacked and I kept throwing up. And I was like, man, I'm really sick. Didn't even think anything of it. I literally thought I was sick.
You just got sick. It was a coincidence.
It was a coincidence. And so I went through the whole day and it got worse progressively, like really started getting worse. Anyways, my drug dealer finally hit me up, came through and dropped off some pills and I still think I'm sick. So anyways, I ended up taking a handful of them. And I remember within 5-10 minutes, like everything went away. And I remember at that point really freaking out and thinking, oh my God, like I got myself into some trouble.
Right, right.
And I really freaked out a little bit. Didn't know what to do besides just keep getting high.
All you know is you don't want to do that again.
I mean, dude, you get these cold sweats and then your hair, every hair on your body stands up like every minute, dude. You're throwing up. The restless legs and restless arms was just, oh my God, brutal.
You said you were anxious? You get a lot of anxiety?
The anxiety would be so bad, dude. You'd feel like your throat was closing. I mean, that's basically what a withdrawal is. And, pill withdrawals were bad, but heroin withdrawals were even worse. Going back to what I was saying, we were hanging out in that Uinta parking lot when I first got involved with heroin. She pulled out the foil and I seen the tar and I remember, like taking it back, like, damn, you really just offered me that? I said, hell no, keep that stuff away from me. Like, I'm good. And I ended up withdrawing that night, all night. But I didn't want to take heroin. But wouldn't you know it, as fate would have it, 2 weeks later, I remember it was like the same side of town, same time of day, same set of circumstances. I had money, couldn't find any. But this time I'm about 12 hours further into my withdrawal. So I'm really feeling it. And I remember, she pulled it out. I can still see her face, and she like went like this. And I was like, screw it, man. Like, whatever. I was so sick. I was so desperate. I'll never forget, man. I couldn't even light it. I couldn't light it or nothing. I was kind of scared. And I ended up just sucking up all the smoke, blew out once, did it again. And that euphoria, I'd been taking pills for some time. And after you've been taking pills for a long time, obviously, like, you're always chasing that first high that will just never come.
Right.
And so I remember once I took that second hit, this insane euphoria, like when I first started taking pills, just insane, amazing euphoria. I mean, that words cannot describe. I am not going to be one here to glorify drug use. That is absolutely not what I'm trying to do.
But you got to tell the story the way that it is.
There's a reason why heroin is a drug that people are willing to throw their lives, their careers, their jobs, their families, dude, families away for. I mean, it was the most insanely blissful, euphoric thing I'd ever experienced up until that point. I remember thinking to myself, wow, I like that.
Right.
I like that. That's basically the first time I started using heroin.
Okay, so you start using heroin, and at this point, you were just smoking it, right? You
Absolutely.
were just smoking it. So let's talk about, like, when did you start shooting it? Like, how long into the progression was that? How did you start doing that? Did you ever think that you were going to? That it was a matter of time? Or did you think you were just going to smoke it, and then at some point you would be done with it?
My heroin use started ramping up a little bit. I was only smoking it. And then I was able to get finally connected in. And, so like, I would always go through this middleman. It was always a friggin' chore and a half to get heroin with him because I'd have to go pick him up, take him to the place. He'd get down, he'd obviously pinch some off my bag, and then he would want me to smoke with him and give him a ride back. And so I remember after doing that so many times, it was, your money's not going very far that way, you know what I mean? And so one day we were on our way to go pick up, and I told him I had just come into extra money that day. And I told him, I was like, yo, dude, let me take this extra 50 on top of what I'm buying, give me his number. And he was like, all right, cool, man. He gets in the car, he's talking to the guy, and I look over and the guy looked down at me for a quick second and then just like gave the guy a nod, and I knew I was in. And that was like the first time I ever really had a moment to myself, because I remember looking up at the KFC sign after I knew I was in and thinking to myself, like, man, dude, like at that point, my relationships around me were getting affected. My job was getting affected by my pill use and heroin use at that point. Actually, at that point it was heroin. I just didn't have a connect to it. Whenever I couldn't buy heroin, I'd get pills. Whenever I could get pills, I could get heroin. So anyways, like, everything was starting to fall apart pretty bad. And I remember thinking to myself, like, man, things have been really bad up until this point, and they're about to get a hell of a lot worse. It went in my one ear and out the other, and I was like, I strapped on my boots and said, let's roll.
You're already strapped in at that point.
So at this point, I'm smoking it. And for those of you guys who don't know, you can do heroin one of three ways. Intravenously, shooting it, you can snort it, or you can smoke it. And so at that point, I had just been smoking it.
What's the difference, would you say, like in terms of like how it feels, like how it hits you?
Well, the
What's the
bioavailability is different in each one of those. Once you slam it, doing mainlining, that's just going straight to your bloodstream. You're getting 100% of that drug right then. You know what I mean?
So that's like the strongest.
So when you snort it, I'm pretty sure the bioavailability is a little higher, so you get most of the drug. And then when you smoke it, it hits your bloodstream, so I would imagine that's got to be pretty high.
But you're also probably losing some in the smoke that you're not catching, so
exactly.
it's a different thing.
Exactly. So that's what the difference of that is. But anyways, I was buying some dope from this one dealer. After smoking heroin, this time I've been using for about 9 months, just smoking heroin, just smoking. And I remember I bought this really, and he told me when he sold it to me, he's like, dude, this stuff really isn't that good, man. He's like, you're only going to get a good value from it if you slam it. And I remember thinking, like, dude, like, what the hell? At the same time, like, when I first came into heroin, I was like, dude, like, what the hell? Did you just really offer me that? Like, screw you, dude. Still bought it, though. But it was so bad that he even gave me a discounted rate at it. And, like, ain't nobody think about drug dealers, bro. Ain't nobody discounting shit,
There's
bro.
not exactly Black Friday deals or anything like that.
Actually, whole nother episode, whole nother story. Like, it was like a couple Saturdays before Christmas, and he called it Fat Sack Saturday, and I was just like, damn. I was far gone at that point, but even when I heard that, I was like, what a crackhead, bro.
You got a website?
I tried to smoke that heroin,
Nothing.
the heroin, nothing. And I remember I did that for like 2 or 3 days. I remember it got to a point where I was just like so withdrawn, and I was just like, you know what, screw it. So one of the guys that I, was riding around with at that time, he knew how to slam it, and he shot me up for the first time. And that was, I remember same thing, like how when homegirl had to light it underneath, and like I had to just suck it with a straw. Dude, I was shaking. I was gonna say,
I know it could be tough, but like, what was that like? What did he do?
He was from the East Coast. He was from the East Coast out there, and so he was, he would always tell these stories about how at that point he was just smoking too, and he was like, oh man, I used to slam this kind of heroin. They had powder, they had all kinds of China White out there. You tell me all these stories, and so I knew he knew how to slam heroin. I had ended up buying some clean needles. I went over to him and I was like, yo, bro, like, can you line me out this first time? And sure enough, he did it, man. He did it. And I remember like watching him, bro, like, oh man, that was like, I mean, looking back at it, bro, it was probably one of the saddest days of my life. My addiction had just fully taken over. I was no longer the same person that I had been or was raised to be. I'm looking down at him and I'm watching him cooking it up in the spoon, and the smell was horrible. It was this nasty pungent smell. It smelled like vinegar.
What were your feelings what were you feeling personally when you were seeing him? Were you disappointed? Were you excited?
So I got kind of lost it. That was intense. No, man. Yeah, no. And I remember I was super nervous. I was shaking, bro. I was shaking. And I'm thinking like, man, like all these thoughts are running through my head. Like, man, it's going to get ugly. It's going to get bad. Like, what the hell are you doing? But I was so dope sick, bro, that, just all went out the window. I laid back. I couldn't even watch him. And I remember him poking me. And I remember just looking the other way. And then all of a sudden, bro, just like the same time when I like smoked heroin for the first time, just that. This dope was absolutely lame as hell to smoke, bro.
But the fact that you were slamming
I slammed it, dude, it was just like, oh my, it was the most incredible feeling I'd ever felt.
It brought you back.
It brought me back, dude. I was back, dude. I was pretty much on the, a downhill slide when I was smoking heroin, but once you start shooting, bro, it's no longer a downhill slide. It's a straight drop off.
By timeline, what was the timeline of you smoking heroin, and then how long were you shooting it?
So I was using heroin for probably about a year. Maybe less than a year, and then the rest of the time I went to needles. Because once you go to needles, bro, there's no taking steps back. It's pointless. It's not gonna.
That's the highest RPMs. You can't just double dip back to anything.
It's like an alcoholic drinking liquor all the time. Beer is not gonna do.
It's not gonna do the trick.
It's literally the exact same concept. Yeah.
Right. So I remember you personally at that time. You weren't the most tremendous person, and this was even when like me and Troy were like.
Thanks for wording it nicely.
We looked at you like a superhero. How did it affect like your personal relationships? How did it affect your family?
Bro, I mean, my wife, God bless her, bro. Like, you know, she put up with a lot of stuff for me. And on this next interview, you guys will actually get a chance to meet Lauren and see my addiction from her point of view and how Kratom turned me around then too. Dude, Lauren, she stuck with me through some dark days, dude. I owe that woman nothing but the world now because, you know, she did everything she could to, you know, give me the detox, give me the rehab, you know, stay up with me withdrawing certain times. You know, dude, she gave me her all and I treated her like crap, bro. And then you guys, you know, I got to the point where you guys didn't even trust me no more. You know what I mean? Dad didn't want me over, mom didn't want me over at the house, you know, understandably so, bro. Understandably so.
I remember
all the only friends I had were all crackhead friends, dude. That's it. It affected my work tremendously. I was always running late. I was always on tweaker time, basically. You know what I mean?
I remember that time with you and it being just generally like uncomfortable to be with you. Me and Troy, we knew you so well that it was like when you were using dope, apparently it wasn't apparent to, you know, my mom or my sister or my dad, but like, I mean, we grew up together. I knew, you know, all of the ways that you spoke, all the ways that you joked around, and you were just always like really irritable. I remember I could deal with the everything else, like you being a little absent, you being a little shady, but I just remember like there was a point where like you were just insufferable. We'd watch TV and you'd get annoyed by something and you would just like start just complaining. And then like you'd want me and Troy to jump in with you, but we were like uncomfortable. It just made it a tough time for a little while there.
You know, one thing I do want these, you know, what the viewers to know is that, you know, like I can say this right now with like complete fact. Like without Ivan here, dude, like without Ivan, I'd be dead, like 100% sure. I'd overdosed a couple times, but yeah, there was this one night, you know, I was always kind of, I guess you could say, a smart drug user. You know, I never wanted to be that guy that got found dead in his room when his parents got home or his wife got home or whatever. So I remember, like, even when I would use inside the house if I was by myself, I would walk outside afterwards immediately, like, so where
just
like,
in case somebody walking past,
I stand a better chance there, somebody finding me outside than inside. You know what I mean? I remember one night I had been drinking. Me and my wife and I got into it because I was getting high. She kicked me out and I went and stayed over at my dad's house. I'd been drinking. You're not supposed to mix alcohol with anything, much less hardcore narcotics.
And was that irregular for you to do?
It was. It really was. I couldn't find heroin all throughout the day, so might as well drink. You know what I mean? Like to kind of curb the craving, which I mean really doesn't, but I mean in my mind I thought it did. I was drinking and I went to the bathroom at my dad's house. And this is this is tough to talk about, bro. I remember cooking it up, and I put the needle in, started pushing away, and I remember thinking to myself, like, I felt it before I even, like, the syringe was pushed all the way down. I felt it and I said, damn, this is gonna be a big hit, dude. Like, you better get moving quick.
Was this more or less or anything that
it
you
was
normally
about the
take?
same, but when you have
alcohol,
it
it's all
just
amplified.
intensifies that, dude. Put all the gear in my pocket and walked out to the hallway, and that's the last thing I remember. Walked to the hallway. The next thing I know, I woke up and I had mom crying right there. I had you guys crying.
Ambulance light over
right
you.
there, and I remember just thinking instantly, damn, bro, you really did it, bro. You really did it. Like that was probably the most embarrassing thing I've ever had to have you guys watching.
Right.
I'm sorry, bro, I had to put you there, man. I love you, brother, for real.
Hey,
man.
we came a long way
Damn
from
right,
then.
man.
From my perspective, it was scary. I mean, I remember, and I was 16 at the time. I remember the only reason you are still alive is because you had some bimbo calling you like 30 times, and I didn't even get up to check on you. I get up because your phone kept ringing. This was the time I was sleeping in the living room.
Right.
And so I remember I kept hearing your phone go off. And I just tried to ignore it because I was like, eventually you'll stop.
That ended up being my saving grace.
And that's the only reason why I went in there. Yeah. Like almost looked like a movie scene. I was like drying my eye and I said, dude, turn off your phone. And then I seen you on the ground. I remember how dark you looked. Like a gray, like a gray all over you. You were just sprawled out on the floor, and I remember I hopped on top of you. I kind of slapped you around. Like I gave you a couple good ones to see like if maybe you had just like passed out or something when you didn't move. Remember I took off to Kayla's room. We woke up everyone, called the ambulance, all that stuff. And
fortunately too, there was a freaking fire department.
A block away we lived from.
A block and a half away, man. So
all the chips fell in your favor to
stick
around here, and it was a difficult time. But
you want to know something, dude? Like I do believe that like God kept me around here because I'm to do things like this.
On the other side.
I'm helping people right now, dude, getting clean every single day, dude. With preaching about Kratom, bro.
Right,
and that's basically what we're trying to do here.
I know that overdose wasn't the end of your drug
One
usage.
last time, bro. I love you, bro. I love you, man.
I love you. I'm glad that you're sharing this. I'm glad you feel comfortable sharing this. I hit
Careful
the mic.
with my mic, boy.
Throughout this heroin experience, were you using Kratom? Had you heard of Kratom? How did you get to Kratom?
Ironically, the guy who taught me how to shoot up for the first time was actually the guy who turned me on to kratom. So, you know, yeah,
Wow.
no, ain't that
Ain't that a kick in the
backwards, dude? So
pants?
I reached out to him because, you know, we get high all the time, and I hadn't seen him in a couple weeks. And so I, you know, hit him up and said, hey, dude, where you been? I thought he went to jail or something. He hit me. He told me, he was like, no, dude. He was like, I got clean using this kratom stuff.
Did you believe that at the time?
Hell no, bro.
Right.
Because any opiate addict who's been using opiates for some time, they know about two things: Suboxone and methadone. And those are the government's prescriptions to treat addiction. And I'm telling you right now, methadone, Suboxone, those are just replacements for heroin. Ask anybody who's been on methadone, they'll tell you that is far more potent than heroin could ever be. There's a whole nother episode on that one. I don't want to go into too far to that one. That one puts me in a bad mood. But
I'll be there for that one.
But there will definitely be an episode on my Suboxone and methadone experience. When he told me that, you know, he was able to get off relatively easy with this kratom stuff, this tree, this tea, this leaf, I was like, bro, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, that's crazy, because in my mind, you can only use methadone and Suboxone to get off. He said, he was like, I know, man, I thought it was the craziest thing too. He was like, the next time you're coming down and you can't find any dope or anything, he was like, go to kratom. And so I wrote it off as he's crazy as hell, like whatever. Come like 2-3 weeks later, didn't have any dope, had money, nobody has anything. And so I remember speeding down to Freaky's downtown Colorado Springs. I'm mid-withdrawal, bro. Mid-withdrawal, driving down there, sweating my ass off, just in an absolute nightmare of a day. I get inside and I asked the guy, I was like, dude, look, man, I'm gonna be honest with you, like, I'm coming off of opiates right now. You know, I heard kratom can help. And this dude, he just looked at me like I was some crackhead, which I was. He didn't offer any insight, any help, nothing.
You were just like, there's the kratom.
He was like, we got these kinds. And I was like, all right, whatever, man. I ended up getting a Red Mang Da. I remember the label on it was Urbanized Botanicals.
I always tell people that. I always remember it was the Urban Ice, 'cause I remember seeing them all over the house. And they were all of this big, weren't they?
Like
How much were they selling?
An ounce for $28. You know, I preach kratom as like a cure-all. As a cure-all, like the way, you know, if you've talked to me and you've heard me talk about kratom, I preach like a cure-all, but it's really not. Like when you get to the point mentally where you want to stop using opiates, because, you know, they say it in AA and NA all the time, oh, you know, you have to want it. You have to want it. But it is so, and it's so irritating. I remember being in those AA classes and everybody's like, oh, you have to want it. And I'm like, dude, if this dude says that one more time, I'm going to punch him in the face, dude. Because, like, I want to, but, like, it's not that easy, you know what I mean? But once you get to the point in your head where you want to do it, like, I can't just go up to a heroin addict on the street and say, hey, take this kratom, boom, it'll fix you. It's the work that you got to put in after that, you know what I mean? You got to decide not to stay clean. You got to stop hanging out with the people that you were hanging with. And believe me, when you decide to make that an honest effort at it, kratom can be an absolutely beautiful tool to get you clean. Get you clean and keep you clean. When Lauren was about to leave me, I ended up kicking, and the withdrawals. I mean, no, the withdrawals were bad, but what people don't understand is that, you know, there's a reason why people go back to it, man, because the cravings are just so unbelievably intense. Like, I used to have dreams of getting high, like, especially when I first got clean. That's where kratom ended up completely saving me. I would have these cravings so bad, bro. I remember one time I was living in my mother-in-law's basement, not paying rent. You know, don't even have 2 pennies to rub together, but I'm fueling a freaking, you know, heroin addiction. I remember looking outside one time and there was like a film, like a light gray film between me and reality. It was like an outer body experience, you know what I mean? This was just a couple days after I really kicked for the first time. And I remember I wanted to get high so bad. I remember once I whipped up my kratom drink and downed it, maybe took some kava with it too. It would completely suppress that craving, replace it with like a little, you know, a little pick me up. And that was really my saving grace, dude. I used to have dreams, man, where like, and these dreams were so vivid. Anybody in recovery, you probably know what I'm talking about. Early on in recovery, you will have dreams, and very intense ones that can, I mean, really, you know, I don't believe in triggers that much nowadays, because I do believe a lot of people just look for triggers.
Overuse it.
I'm just saying, like, I understand triggers are a real thing. I just don't think they're as real as everybody says they are. They're just more excuses. But anyways, so I remember I could see how that could trigger somebody, because I would have these dreams, dude, where I could smell the heroin. I could feel it cooking. I could feel the heat from the lighter. I could feel the needle hit me, dude. But then I wouldn't be able to get high, and I would wake up just like, oh my God, like a desperation feeling to want to get high. So I would then take kratom, and that would curb that urge, man.
So the kratom really helped to round it off down the stretch. Let's get to your closing kind of remarks about kratom, its impact, and how you feel about it and how it's helped you.
Kratom is an absolute godsend. I mean, there's a reason why I ride for this stuff so hard. You know what I mean? Like, this stuff completely changed my life. It gave me my life back. I was able to buy my wife a car last year. Got my credit back up. I was able to put my kids in a house. I got 2 beautiful little boys. And I'm not going to try and get all choked up on that one, but, you know, I believe those little boys were, you know, God's way of rewarding me for getting straight. You know what I mean? Because, I mean, I just feel like right now, dude, life is damn near perfect, bro. You know what I mean? So kratom gave that to me. You know, I got clean because my wife, Lauren, shout out to you, babe. God, I mean, you can't do it without God, bro, and kratom. Without one of those 3, bro, I'm probably not getting clean. Right. I mean, really, kratom gave me my life back. And I used to think that you had to be a recovering junkie to use kratom. Well, 60 or 70% of the people that take kratom are in recovery, I've found that there's some people that take kratom with zero drug history. You know, I know a cop that takes it, 2 firefighters, you know, soccer moms, bro, people that just like, you know, that want to take it instead of pharmaceuticals.
Right.
People that want to take it instead of coffee.
And
bro.
we've talked about in the past, you know, people think of kratom as like this last ditch effort. Oh, I tried everything.
For sure.
And now here I am at kratom. Like, we need to get it on the front lines of it.
You said it perfectly that one time. We want to make kratom looked at as like a first option instead of going to pharmaceuticals. And pharmaceuticals aren't doing it anymore, and they've already sent your life into hell.
The side effects of it.
The side effects are already taken over. Then everybody desperately goes to kratom. I want to make sure people know that kratom's there before they go that route. Beautifully said, bro.
The only thing that I would like to add on to that too, and I haven't really spoken to the camera a whole lot, and I'll take my time to do this now. I believe in my heart of hearts that kratom's giving me my brother back. And I tell people that all the time without any sort of exaggeration, that kratom saved my brother's life. It gave me my brother back, and I'll always be grateful for it. Exactly why I'm here today is just for that. I'm not going to try to get all choked up talking about it, but it means a lot to me, you know, and I see how it affects people in all walks of life. It helps their family. It helps the people around them. Just the way that heroin and opiates hurts the people around you. Kratom, I see it benefiting people and their families, the people they surround themselves with. I tell people all the time, I feel like I'm my best version of myself when I'm taking kratom. I like who I am when I'm on kratom.
One more time, this dude has zero drug history to speak of. He drinks a little bit, but really has never experimented with any hardcore drugs.
I just know that it's for the better good. Like he said, I think it's a godsend. I think that where we can go with kratom in terms of helping people, the sky is the limit. And I don't want to give up on that, and I'll die trying if that's what it takes.
You know what, man? That pretty much sums it up right now for this episode. You know, I really appreciate you guys. For those of you guys who are still here at this point, thank you so much for sticking around this long. I'm telling you, man, we're going to dive into some other stories next on. I'll have my wife. She's got a story to tell.
Thanks for listening to our stories.
Thanks for listening, everybody. This is the Kill the Stigma podcast. Ivan.
You heard it here first.
I love you, man.
That's going to be it.
There you go, man. Thanks for joining.